Thank you, Mr. Chair. It may come as no surprise to my colleagues that I'm rising again, unfortunately, to oppose another education budget here in this chamber. I can share with you that during the years I've been here, the education votes have been the hardest and the most troubling to cast, because every year we're falling further and further behind our competition in other states and in other countries. While other states and other countries are racing ahead in their investment and their human capital, Michigan is struggling to even tread water. But there are some good things in the budget. Let's talk a little bit about that. I think we all agree that we need to do a better job of preparing people for the jobs of the future, and we're seeing some really good new investments in community college and career technical education. Those are good things. Those are things we agree on. Yeah, I think we all also agree on the value of early childhood education. And even though we unfortunately left $65 million in federal money on the table that could be helping our daycare centers here in Michigan provide high quality daycare, it still is an important thing to mention that we're making progress on these two areas. But we're falling sorrowfully behind on both higher education and K-12. And I certainly don't have enough of my time or your attention to go through all of the details, but I just want to say a couple of things. First, starting with higher education, we know that our institutions of higher learning are the best engines of economic development we have in the state. We know that these are job creators. We know that these institutions prepare people for good, high-paying jobs that we want to bring to our state and prepare people for good jobs that they can raise a family on. This is the path to the middle class, and we all know this. Yet, we're still looking at a higher education budget that doesn't even make up for the cuts we made 4 years ago when this governor first got here to Lansing. We savaged higher education with a 15% cut back in 2011, and even with the increases we're seeing over the course of the last couple of years, we're not back to where we started 4 years ago. And that doesn't even tell the whole story. If you go back 10 or 12 years ago, we were putting $1.8 billion a year into higher education. We're still not back to where we were 10 years ago. We're still not back to where we were 4 years ago. And it's not because of the impact of the recession that we were feeling during the second half of the aughts. It's because of bad priorities. It's because of the decisions of this legislature that have said we feel it's more important to invest in tax cuts for the wealthy than investing in our next generation. That's a big mistake for Michigan. It's a big mistake because it puts us at a disadvantage when we're trying to compete for economic jobs or economic growth and jobs. Right? We should be looking at states like Minnesota and Massachusetts that are trying to develop a high percentage of college graduates. We should be listening to our friends at the very, very liberal Business Leaders for Michigan, who are saying that we need to invest in our human capital. Business Leaders for Michigan says we need an additional $100 million a year into higher education just to catch up. This budget doesn't get us anywhere near that. It falls far, far short. And what does that look like for Michigan? Not only does it put us in a bad position to compete for the jobs in the future, it also means that our kids are graduating from college with bigger loans, if they're even able to get to college. This budget pushes a college education further out of reach for the types of hardworking, smart kids that need a little hand up to be able to contribute to our economy in a big way. And it's a huge mistake. We're not investing enough in higher education. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about K-12. There's really not enough we could say about this, and it's really a disservice that we roll these budgets up. We should be talking about K-12 a whole lot more than we are today. But the story of this budget is that while other states are racing ahead, while other states are taking the benefits of this economic resurgence and they're putting it into their future, they're putting it into their kids, we're not doing that here in Michigan. I've been hearing about record amounts of money into public education. Am I looking at the same budget as you are all looking at? Is this some sort of campaign pitch? Because I look at my district isn't getting more money than they were several years ago. Have you all looked at the per pupil funding allotment that your districts are set to get? Is this a record per pupil funding amount? It's not in my community. The only folks who are getting record increases are our cyber schools. Those are the folks who are getting record increases for a program that doesn't even cost the same amount of money as our brick and mortar schools that are struggling. I don't know about anybody of you if you've got kids in the public schools, but if you do, you know that our teachers are sending home notes saying, bring paper, bring pens, bring supplies. We don't have the money to even appoint our classrooms with the types of basic resources that kids need to learn. And here we are in the legislature talking about record investments. The record investment is not showing up in our classrooms. It's not showing up in our classrooms. I'd also like to point out that even though we're looking at a small per pupil funding increase, that's after rolling up $300 million in categoricals. You're taking from one pocket and you're putting it in another pocket, and then you're patting yourself on the back for putting it in that pocket. You're taking money from one pool and putting it in another and then saying it's an increase. That's just not true. That's not true. That is very creative accounting. So the sad thing is today we're hearing about how this is such a great investment. We're hearing about how this is an improvement. But the folks back home know that our school classrooms are not seeing the revenue. They know that our teachers are getting packed with more and more kids in their classroom. And they know that our community schools are not the site of attractors that we need for business development here in Michigan. This is a really sad moment that we're here voting again on a school aid budget that puts the interests of wealthy corporations first and the interests of our schools last, right? Once again, we're taking money out of the school aid fund to make black ink in the state budget to cover the cost of these expensive tax breaks that we passed on for our most wealthy citizens. And then we're telling our kids, congratulations, this is a record investment. I'm so disappointed.